Why are you pumped that we started Alliance Writers Collective?
Well, mostly because I'm jealous of those Alliance worship guys, because I can't sing. So here's my opportunity. We need to renew something like that. And this is how movements develop their theology through worship and writing. So this is one of the ways that we can do that.
Hey, welcome Alliance Writers Collective. My name is Justin, and this is our first interview. And it's an interview, it's not really a podcast. We're not trying to set things up on Apple or Spotify or any of those things. We just want this to be an intimate interview for our community. We want this community to be a community that supports, resources, promotes, because self-promotion is horrible. It's like top 10 things, worst things in the world: American politics, tsunamis, war, self-promotion. And so we're here to promote each other, support each other, encourage each other, resource each other. Our mantra is this: we're a rooted movement with inspired writing, and we're more inspired together. In other words, we're just a better movement when we have good writing going on, and we're more inspired when we're supporting each other as a community. So today we have Jim Rudd, the handsome and ruddy individual that you see on your screen. How are you, Jim?
I'm doing very well. Now that you've introduced me in that manner, how are you doing?
I'm good. Good. I read 1 Samuel this morning. They put David out there as handsome and ruddy. I just felt like that was you as soon as I saw you on this screen. So I've got Jim Rudd today. Wanda Walborn's next. Warren Bird, Rob Bremer. We got a lot of folks coming up. And Jim was so kind to just be the first on the list. He's a father, a husband, an urban church planner, and a Philadelphia Eagles fan. All things that just
Birds.
I feel like I just listed off my Twitter profile, like those father, husband, Eagles fan, church planner. So I mean, we just aligned. We went to Nyack at the same time. Yeah. More importantly, Jim wrote The Divine Council, Powers and Principalities: A Brief Explanation of Territorial Spirits, which, taking that on, I mean, he just took that topic on and wrote a short book about it. Amazing. And then most recently, the one we're going to talk about today is Make Disciples That Sustain Revival. I've known Jim for years. I trust his heart that as he's writing this book, he's living this book, that his faithful feet are matching his writing mind. So without further ado, we're going to throw Jim some questions. Again, if you want to comment or you want to ask questions, Jim is a part of our community, so he'll answer those questions. We can follow up in the comment section on Facebook. So that's how this thing is going to go. We're going to put one of these out once a month. I've always known you as Jim, and in the mail I get this book, and it's got this real fancy name, this real academic name, James B. Rudd, and I'm like, who is this guy? And then I also thought, in all seriousness, there are some writers out there that are like, hey, I'm thinking about changing my name for a few practical purposes, at least as a writing name, as a public name. And so maybe you could speak to why you went with James B. Rudd.
Yeah, that is a great question. And I did actually put thought into that. It's not just something I did on a whim. So really two reasons. Number one, it is my actual name. Jim is a nickname. James is my actual name. So just like that's what's on my driver's license and that's what's on my birth certificate, I thought it's a book. Maybe move to the side of formality for that purpose. Just as you did not publish your book under Juice Thornton, I think you did not use your nickname.
Bring that up, man.
So you went with your actual name. So that's one reason I just went with my actual name, James B. Rudd. The other reason that's very practical is that there are other Jim Rudds out there. who have written stuff that, frankly, I don't want to be associated with. There's a Jim Rudd that wrote a book of poetry. Nothing wrong with poetry, not my genre. And then there's also another Pastor Jim Rudd, who is part of the Christian Street Preachers Alliance, and I'm Pastor Jim Rudd of the Christian and Missionary Alliance. And he's written some stuff that I just, about once a year, someone will contact me wondering if I'm him, and I always have to say, nope, I'm definitely not him. Even my own father confused me with him at one point, so I just didn't want to be Pastor Jim Rudd of the Alliance because he's Pastor Jim Rudd of the Alliance. So I want James B. Rudd so that I could create a little bit of separation. I think I finally have surpassed him in the Google algorithm. So if you search for me, you'll get me before you'll get him.
Yeah.
He's also very ruddy though, and has a killer smile. So.
Okay. Just in case people look him up.
Yeah.
Great. That actually gives me freedom because the first like 300 Justin Thorntons of the world are phenomenal athletes of like all the major sports. There's just so if you want to find Justin Thornton book, you got to go through pages on pages. And also that reminds me of this this thing that I keep in my office because the first day I put the book on Amazon, my own personal book, you couldn't really find it because it just wasn't important enough. And the first thing that came up was a yodeling pickle. And I don't know why, but it was just a really humbling moment of this is, you're looking for me, but you get a yodeling pickle. And to humble me further, my buddy bought me the actual yodeling pickle.
So you obviously were not a big dill, but now you are a big dill, and that's working out for you.
I can't believe I haven't heard that to go along with this yet. Shame on me.
Yeah. Well, if we're doing advice for writers, because that's a real challenge. Is how do I move my name up the search results?
Yeah.
Ask people to review your book. I did that with both of mine. Gave a couple free copies out. Said if you'll just review it, I said just nothing below 3 stars. If it's below 3 stars, keep the book and don't write a review. But if I actually asked them to do that before I made it public, so that by the time it launched, I had half a dozen reviews already. That helped it move up the search results. So that's something to consider for people that are aspiring writers is get your mom to write a review, get your grandma to write a review. It helps you show up in search results.
Yeah, great. Super practical. You self-published, as most of us are smaller time folks. We tend to lean that way. We're trying to strip the shame off that idea because it can be really helpful and maybe the most important step for folks who don't have a super large platform or who don't care as much about a very large platform. So tell us how you got there. Tell us why you chose to do it that way.
Well, I thought of some other people that self-published: Moses, Jesus, Paul, Martin Luther, and A.B. Simpson. And I like to think of myself in that group of people.
Yeah, it's your squad. Yeah.
No, actually, I didn't know that I was going to self-publish when I set out to do this. I really was thinking kind of traditional publishing, where you find a publisher, you submit a manuscript, you work with them on it. And I did do some research on that process, and I'm not an expert on publishing, but I did find that there's a couple of different routes that you can go. Traditional publishing, I had to fill out a proposal for a book before they wanted to know anything about the book. They wanted to know how big my congregation was and how many social media followers I had. And, my congregation is slightly larger than the average evangelical church of 75, but it's not enough to justify a book. And I actually had taken the exact opposite approach to social media, and that I tried to keep my friends list tight to people that I actually interact with. So it turns out that a social media approach that was good for my soul was bad for book sales. And that kind of discouraged me from pursuing traditional publishing because they were not, they were primarily concerned with the marketability of the book before they ever wanted to look at the content. And so I chose not to go that route, but not that I had a bunch of offers either. What I did instead was I took the biggest, longest, fattest, best written paper that I wrote in seminary, and I thought, I'm going to experiment with publishing this as a short book on Amazon. And that is the first book, The Divine Counsel, Powers, and Principalities. I experimented with the process. I figured out how that went, and I was shocked how easy that was and how much control I was able to maintain, and that the royalties from the sales of the book were competitive. And I loved it. I mean, I was just shocked. I did it on a whim. Within 48 hours, I had a paper copy in my hand. It was crazy. And that was the hump for me to realize, okay, I can do this. Traditional publishing is great.
Yeah.
If you already have a huge audience and you expect to be in Barnes and Noble. But since neither of those are true of me, I thought, well, if I can't be in Barnes and Noble, I'd at least want to be on Amazon, and I can go directly through Amazon by self-publishing, or they call it independently publishing. And so that's the route I've taken. However, I've tried to do everything that a publisher would do. I've had both books. I mean, my first book, I had 4 people with PhDs read because it's a little more academic. So I had scholars read it, provide feedback. So in a sense, it's peer reviewed. Same with the second book. I got feedback. I had 6 people edit it for grammar and content. Got the reviews done in advance, got endorsements, designed the cover myself. If you're willing to do all that work, then you earn that higher royalty that you're going to end up keeping. But it is a process.
Yeah, there's something entrepreneurial about it that kind of goes along with church planting. Like, you have to arrange your squad, you have to get your editors together, the people that are going to review it. You have to figure out graphics, and I mean, all this stuff is stuff that church planners deal with today. So it probably was comfortable for you to do those things.
It was. I mean, I asked people that I knew would be willing to and believed in me, and then I sweetened the pot by providing them all with a gift card to their favorite coffee shop, a free autographed copy of the book, and I put their name in the acknowledgments of the book. And so it cost me $100 to get that done, but it's definitely worth it for the work that they put in. So yeah, I would recommend find some people that believe in you, that are grammar Nazis, and have them look through the stuff and provide you with feedback. And I got great feedback. I actually reworded a few sentences and rewrote a few paragraphs based on the feedback that I received. So definitely, it was the end stage there was a real team approach.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I saw another interesting idea that I adopted. They did a buddy box, and so they put a book in there, a signed book, and some other trinkets, and a handwritten note that was, kind of full of gratitude. And that was a super helpful idea I saw as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just
There's
kind of
ways to get editing help that aren't gonna be prohibitive for a self-publishing author.
Right. It's good. Again, really, really practical, and hopefully that's what this is about. We're just trying to help you guys answer some questions that maybe you have as you go along the journey, whether it's your first time or maybe you've published 3 to 6 books and you want to help us out in the comment section. You could do that too. Again, this is just supposed to be a community. So your writing style it's probing, it's well researched. It didn't just have a lot of scripture in here. It had history of revival for sure, and it was academic and personal all at the same time. And I put this question in the comments today on Question Blitz Tuesday, so I'll say it here too. I'll ask it here too. How did you come up with that voice? How did you find your voice? Maybe you don't feel like you found your voice yet, but there's 2 schools of thought: that you can't write how you talk, or you should write how you talk, because your personality, especially if you have a good one, it should be in your writing. So how did you kind of navigate finding your voice in these 2 books?
Yeah, the two are very different. I mean, the first one about the divine counsel is just straight academic. There's no illustrations, there's no application, there's no jokes, there's no personal stories. The second one, Make Disciples That Sustain Revival, is very much me. I mean, this is me as much as a book can be me. This is my voice. I think my writing voice is not the same as my speaking voice. My writing voice is what I wish my speaking voice was. It's if I had a little more time to think about the words and a little more time to collect some other data or quotes or content, that's how I would speak. But yeah, my writing voice is what I aspire my speaking voice to be someday. I wrote it over the course of 9 months, so I had plenty of time to refine it. Also, just a lot of experience writing different genres. So I write sermons. I have a blog. I write a blog. I can tell which blogs do better than others. So if I write a blog and I feel very good about it, but it gets no traction, I take note of that. I can write another blog. I feel so-so about it, but it gets a lot of traction. I take note of that. If there's one that I feel great about and it gets a lot of traction and the two things meet, I really take note of that. So that helps me understand my voice. Also, frankly, going to seminary, having to write a bunch of stuff for my master's degree just helped me develop that. I don't write, I generally don't write and speak the way I would write a paper for school, but that did help me think more clearly and write more precisely.
Sure. So your school of thought is really find your voice by writing often, writing different genres, taking note, learning, growing.
My normal writing voice is more pastoral, but it will be researched because often my writing is the overflow of my sermon prep. So I do have time to read other sources and do some research.
Yeah, let's go there now. I mean, you took a sermon series and you turned it into a book. I'm sure there are plenty of pastors listening like, oh, you could do that?
Yeah.
I thought that one sermon series was pretty good. I feel like I could. So what was the process about on how you went from, okay, this needs to be an actual book, or did those two things come flipped? You're like, I want to write a book on this. Let's do a sermon series on it first. How did that come about? And then what was your process to execute it?
Well, the idea of sermon content definitely came first, but not only can you turn a sermon series into a book, I recommend it. It's a really efficient use of time if you're interested in writing, and it gives your teaching ministry an extra avenue or outlet. So the Make Disciples That Sustain Revival book, Make Disciples That Sustain Revival is our church's vision statement. This is something that I started developing in 2017. I fleshed this out over the period of several years, actually. It's like many pastors, you might preach on your church's vision every year. So every year I was revisiting, going a little deeper, learning more. Occasionally I'll get an opportunity to teach at like a camp or a conference. And this was my pocket of 6 sermons that I would always bring with me. If I was speaking somewhere else, it was one of these 6 sermons. So I got to preach them in half a dozen different settings. I got to get feedback from probably close to 1,000 different people.
Interesting.
And then I decided in rapid succession, I preached this series 4 times in 1 year in 4 different places. And then I wrote it. So it was boom, 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 write it. And it was all fresh and worked through. And that's how I wrote, it really was like writing a series of essays and then stitching them together.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how was that part, the stitching them together? Because I think that's probably the hard nuance that people are thinking of.
Yeah. So don't feel like you have to know exactly where in the book this section is going to fit before you start to write it. Write it first. I don't have a whole chapter on forgiveness. I have a portion of a chapter that's on forgiveness. I wrote that portion as a sermon manuscript, and I set it aside. When it came time to put the book together, I found the best place for it, and then I just wrote like a transition at the beginning and a transition at the end to tie everything together. It's like building a car or building a piece of furniture. You're assembling it as it goes. It's still my writing, it's still my thinking. You don't have to know exactly where everything fits on day one.
Yeah, that's really helpful. So I am a avid Jim Rudd follower on Facebook. You're one of my favorite followers. Favorite follows. So you're witty, you're funny, you're smart, and I'm watching you go to the Asbury revival. I'm excited to hear your comments when you get back. And then not only do you have comments when you get back from the Asbury revival, but this just sneaks in a couple weeks later. It felt like it's like, oh,
It was a couple weeks later, you know.
yeah, that's some timing right there. Tell me about, you know, was that planned? How did that go?
It was not planned by me. No. I mean,
You didn't
the
plan the Asbury
revival.
revival?
No,
Okay.
I was not in the planning meetings for that. Revival's been a passion in my life. When everything kind of started taking place at Asbury, I watched it very closely online. I was immediately caught up in it, supported it, encouraged it. And then, I mean, frankly, I woke up one morning about 10 days in. It was a Saturday morning. I felt like the Lord said, if you don't go to that, you're going to be disobedient, which is not something I would put on anyone else. I'm not saying that that's required of anyone but me. But I just felt like if I don't get in a car and drive to Kentucky, I personally would be disobedient. So within about 36 hours, and this is kind of toward the tail end of the public meetings at Asbury, but I took my son, who was 12 at the time, and we just made it like a part of his discipleship was this trip. And we weren't sure we were even going to get in, but the Lord made a way for us to get in. And I did not want to be a religious tourist, so we were very careful to honor what was happening there, and to not be like aggressive or pushy. We did not want to violate the sacred space or what was going on there, but we were able to get in to the actual sanctuary that probably most of us saw online. And at that point, the book was already 75% written, but I had kind of stalled out. During that time was when they were trying to figure out, how do we transfer what's happening at Asbury? We don't want to shut it down, but we need to like disperse it or send it out. And I thought, man, I wish there was a book on how to sustain revival. And I'm 75% of the way through. So I hurried up and finished it. Probably 6 weeks earlier than I thought I would have. And while I don't mention Asbury Revival in the book, there are a couple pages dedicated to what I saw and learned there. And you can probably, actually, knowing that backstory, probably a person could identify those sections now. But yeah, that was divinely orchestrated. I remember telling my wife when I get home, like, I have to finish this book, because how to sustain revival is going to be a pressing question that people have now.
Yeah, it's really good. Great story. What are some of the deeper things that God taught you through writing and the writing process in general?
Yeah. He has a curriculum for each one of our lives. This is something my old pastor, Mike Plunkett, would say sometimes. God has a curriculum for each one of us. It's unique to us. And basically what's in Make Disciples That Sustain Revival has been the curriculum for my life for the last 20 years. Even though I didn't always have the terminology and the structure for it, the idea of valuing the manifest presence of God and being filled with the Holy Spirit, living in community, cultivating a healthy soul, and growing in spiritual formation are really the 5 key themes of my life for 20 years. And those also happen to be the chapters of the book.
Right.
So be aware of the curriculum that God has for your life. It's going to be different than someone else's. And cultivate an awareness of it and develop it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if, we talked about this, if there is a thesis on page 39, it says, I'm convinced that revival is sustained by being filled with the Holy Spirit, valuing the manifest presence of God, growing in spiritual formation, developing healthy souls, and living in community. We just talked about. So, how did you not just come to that kind of as a thesis and a structure, but how did you decide I'm going to build up to this? Because I think there's authors who know what they want their thesis to be. They know exactly what they want their book to be about. They want a crescendo to it,
Yeah.
to kind of apex at that right moment. They don't want to just put it on the first page and let it rip, but they want some tension. They want some inductive reasoning to go up to it. So, I mean, that's page 39.
Yeah. Right.
How did you decide I want to really build up to this and go from there?
Well, that was really the result of years of conversations that I'd had with people about the concept of sustaining revival and the questions that they came with. So first, when I would talk about making disciples that sustain revival, inevitably people first and foremost, they want to know, what do you mean by revival? Because the idea of whatever they think of with revival, it's not sustainable.
It's what you talk about in the first chapter. Yeah.
Yes, the beginning. Yeah, so the beginning chapter, the caricature versus the character of revival. So first, I want to define. Here's what I mean when I define revival: spiritual renewal that leads to social change. And then it's okay. I like that.
Yeah.
How do we sustain it? Are there some strategies?
Yeah.
So the remaining 5 chapters of the book are the strategies. So really, I was having to answer questions about sustained revival for years. And as I developed those responses, so when a person's writing, you do want to put yourself in the shoes of the reader. What questions might the reader have? And how can I anticipate those questions and answer those?
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Those are some of the deeper lessons. Give us some more, other more practical lessons that you learned. That might be helpful.
Yeah. The self-publishing or independent publishing through Amazon really was surprisingly easy. I'm not saying it's like there's no work to it. There is, but it's definitely doable. Also, something to just be aware of. So the opportunities here are going to be different for each individual. So for pastors, if you occasionally have the opportunity to preach at another church or preach at a Bible camp or preach at a conference, you will have opportunities to sell the books person to person that go beyond just listing it on Amazon. But if you are not a person who has normal speaking engagements, you're going to have to think of other ways to market and sell your book. You have a website and a Facebook page, I believe, dedicated to your book, The Preacher, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a great, I have not done that, but I think that's a great tool that people can do or use to get the book out. You have to find a way to get the book out. I have my own personal website. It's not dedicated to the book, but you can find my book on my website. And just finding ways that you can get the word out. I think people sometimes think, I'll just write it and leave it out in the ether and people will find it. No, they won't.
They'll find a pickle, man. They go find a pickle.
They will find a pickle. I think I read that there's like 40 million books listed on Amazon. They will not find it. I mean, I live in a city of 1.6 million people, so I have a 25 times better chance of finding the right person in Philadelphia than they have of finding your book on Amazon. So you are going to have to put effort into that. One of the reasons I love the Alliance Writers Collective is I, like you, hate self-promotion. It just feels unnatural to me. When other people do it, it feels kind of like, oh, come on. Why are you doing this to me? You want me to pay you to hear your thoughts. So being part of a group like this is so beneficial and helpful to me. because we encourage one another, we promote one another, we learn from one another. I love that. So if you're not part of the Alliance Light Writers Collective, then connect with some other people that can serve the same purpose.
Yeah. By the way, invite people to the Alliance Writers Collective. We hope they're authors. We hope they're a part of the Alliance. But the network of the people that started this is not big enough to reach all Alliance writers. So feel free to invite people, because I do think it would be helpful, just like Jim said. Any other practical notes?
Well, I already talked about how to piece it together. I think, my approach has been, I'm not trying to be a career writer. I'm not trying to make like my whole income off of writing. So in that sense, I am pricing my books lower because I'd rather the word get out. I'm not trying to buy a second house. I'd rather the concepts and the principles be disseminated. So I want to price it low enough that it's like accessible to people. And when you're getting endorsements, identify your audience and then select your people that are going to endorse it based on who that audience would respect. So that's helpful. And then, like if you're writing a book of poetry, don't get someone from NASA to endorse it. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's Stephen Hawking. People that read books on poetry don't look to him for endorsements. And so get your endorsements from people that are kind of like credible in the field or the genre that you're writing in. I think I've probably covered as many practical tips as I can give right now.
Yeah, I'm really interested on this person who is both a poet and has friends at NASA. This is a super interesting person that we built. Let's go through rapid fire. We're going to try to do this with each author. So be ready, because they're going to come hot. Your favorite new author?
Okay, I don't know how new he is. I think it's probably, and I don't know what you mean by new, but in the last 7 years, John Tyson. He is a pastor in New York City. I think he actually went to Toccoa Falls, I believe. Australian guy, church planter, and I really resonate with him. His jokes are funny, his sermons are insightful. So I will listen to him, his podcast, as well as read his books. Yeah.
Just wrote a book on fatherhood, correct?
Yes. And that book prompted my approach to discipleship with my son. It's called The Intentional Father. Very good book.
Good. Most important book that you're reading right now?
Okay. Obviously the Bible, but aside from that, reading a devotional by Tony Evans, who's a pastor in Dallas, Texas. The book, it's a daily devotional for men called No More Excuses. He had me at the title. The title was worth the cost of the book, but it really is about men taking responsibility.
That's good. Best cheesesteak spot?
Used to be a place called Joe's, which was right around the corner from our church. It has since moved. They probably still are the best, but I'm not going to drive 25 minutes. Right. So Steve's Prince of Steaks on Bustleton Ave is my go-to spot. There's also a great place called Delisandro's, which I don't go to. It's even a little further away. So Joe's, Delisandro's, or Steve's. Don't go to Pat's and Gino's unless you have to. I mean, those are convenient, but not too many people in Philadelphia go there.
That's gold for
they're
those
not bad.
traveling.
They're not bad.
Right. Yeah, if you're coming from outside Philly, it's still going to be new project that you're thinking of.
So thinking of writing a devotional myself. This because I do like writing short little essays, almost like blog length, 200, 250 words. That seems to come natural to me. This actually is somewhat in response to one of the things that I observed at Asbury, just the young people in their 20s who are leading this. So like millennials and Gen Z. So I would not market this is a devotional for millennials and Gen Z, because I'm not that corny. But I have been thinking about the questions that they are asking and the values that they have. Like, they value authenticity.
Mhm.
They value making a difference in the world. They value service to others. They value freedom. Sometimes they value things that are in conflict with one another. Like, they want freedom, but they also want rootedness in community. So how do you carry the tension between those? So a devotional that all of those, the Bible has something to say about.
For sure.
So I just want to provide a biblical perspective on these values and passions of essentially people under 40. But I would write this for everyone. I mean, I would not market this to a specific age group, but it is written with them in mind.
Great. Favorite Alliance influence?
Well, I love A.W. Tozer. I mean, I named my first son after Tozer. My in-laws coincidentally live like 20 minutes from where he's buried, so I visit his grave every year. It's just a coincidence. I really do resonate
Is
with
it
a
though?
lot of
Because
his
like
writing.
you're there, you're near it. It doesn't mean you have to make the trip that day.
You're right. I don't have to, but there is a great coffee shop across the street from it
Okay. All right.
called Artisan Coffee. So I don't know. If you live 20 minutes from Nick Foles's house, you would camp outside of it, regularly, right? Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying.
Old Saint
Probably
Nick.
Toast.
Old Saint Nick loves Jesus, by the way. I'll just put that out there. Last but not least, why are you pumped that we started Alliance Writers Collective?
Well, mostly because I'm jealous of those Alliance worship guys because I can't sing. So here's my opportunity. But more realistically, we needed something like this. I have a whole section of my library of Christian publications books. I mean, there's a whole A.B. Simpson section, a whole Tozer section, a Paul King section. I probably have 75 books that came from Christian publications. That no longer exists. I have a big old stack of Alliance Academic Review books published by Christian publications, edited by Dr. Elio Kukuro. And we need to renew something like that. And this is how movements develop their theology through worship and writing.
That's a good word.
So this is one of the ways that we can do that. Obviously, we are not always doing a great job teaching what we believe, which is why we sometimes have factions among us that disagree on core, what we would say are like our distinctives. So writing is one of the ways to do that. And I'm excited to do that. And then for the kind of the personal reasons, the self-promotion is not fun. It's great to get feedback from other people. Publishing a book it's never been more achievable than it is right now. In the history of the print, of print, it's never been more achievable to publish a book. So just I'm grateful to be part of the early days of the Alliance Writers Collective. I wish it had been around a year ago, but I'm happy that it's around now.
Awesome, man. Thank you to my fellow Eagles fan and church planner.
Go Birds.
Thanks for being authentic and sharing your heart with us. And we'll see you at the Alliance Writers Collective.